The snow of Alaska settled on everything with crystalline precision. It dusted the barracks, the communication towers, and the woman who stepped off the military transport. Her weathered backpack hung from shoulders that seemed too slight to bear whatever burden she carried. Her name was Maya Chen, and she arrived without ceremony, a civilian phantom materializing at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. The sentries at the checkpoint watched her approach through the swirling white, their trained eyes swept over her unremarkable appearance. Dark jeans worn soft at the knees, faded navy jacket that had seen better seasons, scuffed hiking boots that spoke of countless miles, lingering on her hands. A network of thin, white scars traced patterns across her knuckles and fingers like frost on glass, delicate yet somehow ominous. A barely visible mark ran along her jawline, giving her an expression of perpetual quiet calculation. One airman elbowed his partner, their breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. "Look at this lady. Thinks she got in a fight with a paper shredder," he muttered, stamping his feet against the cold. The other chuckled, adjusting his rifle strap. "Nah, probably tangled with a food processor. Contractors, man. Always getting into weird accidents." They saw a civilian contractor, middle-aged and unremarkable, with scars they categorized as occupational hazards. Workshop accident, maybe. Kitchen mishap. Nothing worth noting in their world of military precision and daily routine. Maya's gaze swept across the sprawling installation, taking in the steam rising from heated buildings and the distant silhouettes of aircraft against the gray sky. She heard their casual dismissal, had heard variations of it countless times before, but her expression remained impassive. She stood like a monument against the swirling snow, as still and enduring as the mountains that ringed the base in the distance. She presented her credentials with efficient movements, each gesture economical and purposeful. The guard's casual mockery faded slightly when he saw the official seal, the crisp letterhead that spoke of Pentagon authorization, orders designating her as a cybersecurity analyst, deliberately vague, bureaucratic camouflage that revealed nothing while implying everything. It made her forgettable. It made her someone else's responsibility. The airman handed back her ID with a perfunctory nod, eager to return to the warmth of the checkpoint booth. "Welcome to Elmendorf, ma'am. Try not to freeze." His duty was done. Chen was now someone else's problem. As she walked toward the operations center, Maya felt the familiar weight of dismissive glances settling on her shoulders like the falling snow, a well-worn cloak she'd carried across multiple assignments, multiple lives. The airmen and soldiers she passed saw only a slight woman contractor with weathered hands, an anomaly in their domain of youth and vigor. They couldn't perceive the coiled alertness in her measured gait, or the unsettling stillness in her dark eyes, the look of someone who had navigated digital battlefields far more treacherous than their physical training ground. Colonel Patricia Westbrook's office was a sanctuary of controlled temperature amid the base's harsh environment. Awards gleamed behind protective glass like captured sunlight, and a massive Air Force flag dominated one wall, its fabric crisp and perfectly aligned. Westbrook herself embodied the same rigid efficiency as her surroundings, sharp-featured with a discipline so deeply ingrained it had carved all warmth from her demeanor. She studied Maya seated across from her imposing steel desk and saw a bureaucratic inconvenience, wrapped in civilian clothing. She tapped a manicured finger against Maya's personnel folder, a document that was suspiciously sparse, raising more questions than it answered. "Miss Chen," she began, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance and unquestioned respect. "Your file lacks substantial detail. It indicates you're here for network security assessment, but the specifics are vague." She leaned forward slightly, her stare designed to intimidate. Her eyes noted Maya's scarred hands, and a flicker of something impatience, condescension, perhaps even pity, crossed her features before being quickly suppressed. "We operate extremely sensitive, extremely critical systems here. Lives depend on our communications integrity. What precisely are your qualifications?" Her tone suggested Maya couldn't possibly possess any credentials that mattered in this world of classified networks and national security. "Penetration testing," Maya replied, her voice quiet and steady, devoid of any need to convince or impress. "Vulnerability assessment. System hardening." The brevity of her response seemed to annoy Westbrook. She had anticipated nervous explanations, desperate attempts at credibility, perhaps even stammering justifications for her presence. Instead, she received only facts, delivered with the kind of confidence that came from certainty rather than bravado. Westbrook exhaled sharply, a sound of profound bureaucratic frustration. This was clearly a political favor from someone at Cyber Command, an administrative burden she'd been forced to accept without explanation. Fine, she would assign Maya somewhere harmless where she couldn't disrupt actual operations or interfere with real work. Very well, she said, closing Maya's file with a decisive snap that echoed in the climate-controlled air. We have a new satellite communication initiative, Project NIGHTFALL. They've been experiencing some technical difficulties. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Persistent system anomalies that our regular technicians haven't been able to resolve. You can review their protocols, observe their operations. Perhaps your civilian perspective will provide some insight. It was exile disguised as assignment. She was relegating Maya to the corner of a struggling program, a place to sit quietly and justify her paycheck until her contract mercifully expired and she could be forgotten entirely. She stood a clear signal the meeting had concluded. Major Rodriguez will escort you to the facility. Try not to interfere with my personnel, Miss Chen. They have critical work to accomplish, work that keeps our forces safe and connected across the globe. The unspoken message hung in the frigid air like ice crystals, work you couldn't possibly understand. Maya nodded, her composed expression offering no foothold for Westbrook's institutional arrogance. She rose and followed the major out, leaving Colonel Westbrook alone in her sanctuary of order, confident she had successfully contained the disruption before it could spread to more important matters. The facility assigned to Project NIGHTFALL was a cathedral of humming electronics and restless energy. The electronic chirp of communications equipment mixed with the white noise of cooling fans and the urgent, technical conversations of young specialists who believed they were protecting the nation's most vital secret. Banks of servers lined the walls like digital altars, their blinking lights creating patterns of red, green, and amber that painted the faces of the technicians in ethereal hues. Maya was given a small workstation in a corner, an isolated island in an ocean of classified activity. The desk was standard military-issue metal, functional, devoid of personality. Someone had thoughtfully provided her with a basic computer terminal and a stack of outdated technical manuals that looked like they hadn't been opened in months. The satellite operators and crypto analysts, most barely past their advanced technical training, gave her considerable space. They moved around her like water around a stone, acknowledging her presence with polite nods but keeping their conversations deliberately vague when she was within earshot. They saw her as Westbrook did, a contractor and outsider, a civilian woman in territory they considered sacred ground. They called her the analyst with subtle condescension, the emphasis on the making it clear she was singular, isolated, other. Sometimes when they thought she couldn't overhear, they referred to her more directly as Ghost, partly because of her pale complexion and quiet demeanor, partly because she seemed to fade into the background of their bustling, important world. She didn't react to their whispered comments or attempts at categorization. She didn't try to correct them or force herself into their technical discussions or social circles. She simply observed, her dark eyes tracking the complex dance of information and machinery that surrounded her. Her routine became quietly methodical, almost meditative in its precision. She would arrive each morning before most of the staff settle at her corner workstation with a thermos of coffee that never seemed to empty and begin monitoring the endless streams of data that flowed through the facility's network. Her eyes tracked the intricate patterns of digital communication, satellite handshakes, encryption protocols, and network traffic, with the focused attention of someone reading a familiar but complex language. She detected the subtle inefficiencies that others missed, microsecond delays that compounded into larger problems, routing protocols that took unnecessarily complex paths, encryption algorithms operating at less than optimal efficiency. She saw the cascading vulnerabilities born from overconfidence and insufficient comprehension of the systems the young technicians operated with such casual expertise. They treated the satellite network like an invincible fortress, impenetrable and eternal, while she examined it as a complex ecosystem, with its own weaknesses, behavioral patterns, and hidden vulnerability. Her attention was frequently drawn to a particular terminal in the facility's far corner, an older ML-star communication node that sat in a state of semi-retirement, partially decommissioned and largely forgotten. It had been cannibalized for parts over the months, its components scavenged for newer, more advanced installations. The technicians called it the relic, joking about its obsolete status and outdated protocol. To them it was a museum piece, a reminder of earlier, simpler times in military communications. Maya would occasionally approach it during quiet moments, her fingers tracing the worn edges of its interface panels with something approaching reverence. The metal was smooth from years of use. The labels faded but still readable to someone who knew what to look for. She would rest her palm against its inactive display, her head tilted slightly as if listening for signals that no longer transmitted, frequencies that had long since gone silent. Staff Sergeant Torres, more perceptive and less arrogant than his colleagues, noticed this strange ritual. He was a communications specialist with 5 years of experience, frustrated by the project's persistent and seemingly inexplicable problem. Unlike his peers, he'd begun to suspect that their issues went deeper than simple technical glitches or software bugs. One evening, as the facility emptied and the ambient noise died down to the essential hum of electronics, he gathered enough courage to approach Maya as she stood beside the relic. "Find something interesting, ma'am?" he asked, his voice respectful but curious. There was something about her quiet confidence that commanded a different kind of attention than the usual contractor deference. Maya didn't startle or seem surprised by his approach. She turned slowly, her calm gaze meeting Torres's with a directness that was somehow both welcoming and slightly unsettling. "Legacy," she said quietly, her voice carrying an odd weight. "Every system has one, every network, every protocol, every line of code. This one's just been forgotten." Her words were simple, but they struck Torres as unexpectedly profound. He glanced at the faded identification numbers stenciled on the terminal's casing, then back at Maya. His eyes caught a glimpse of something on her wrist, partially hidden by the sleeve of her jacket and an old burn scar that wrapped around her forearm like a twisted bracelet. It was a small, intricate tattoo, a circuit pattern rendered in dark ink, geometric and precise, as cryptic and mysterious as the woman who bore it. The tension began mounting like an Arctic storm, the air in the facility growing heavy with anticipation and nervous energy. General Pike, a figure whose reputation preceded him through every classified briefing room in the Pentagon, was arriving for a comprehensive security evaluation that would determine the future of Project NIGHTFALL. The focal point of his visit was an extensive live-fire penetration test, designed to validate the new communication architecture with its advanced satellite encryption protocols at the core. For Colonel Westbrook, this wasn't merely another routine inspection, it was the pivot point upon which her next star would turn, the moment that would define the trajectory of her career. Success meant promotion, recognition, and validation of her leadership. Failure was not an option she could afford to contemplate. The day of the test dawned clear and brutally cold, the kind of Arctic morning that made breathing feel like swallowing ice crystal. From a sophisticated command center that hummed with the latest in military technology, Westbrook and her staff monitored multiple display screens showing satellite positions, network status, and data flow patterns. Their confidence filled the heated room like a tangible presence. General Pike stood behind them, a silent, imposing figure whose very presence seemed to add weight to the air around him. The test began perfectly, a textbook demonstration of modern military communication. The first wave of encrypted communications flowed seamlessly through the network, satellite feeds displaying pristine data streams from various global positions. Real-time video, secure voice communications, and classified data packets moved through the system with elegant precision. For the first 30 minutes, everything proceeded exactly as the technical specifications promised. Then it happened. The primary encryption key flickered, a barely perceptible stutter in the data stream that might have been missed by less experienced operators. A thin stream of corrupted data began flowing across the monitors like digital blood in clear water. A second satellite link went dark without warning, then a third. The cascade began slowly, almost gently, before accelerating into catastrophic failure. Within 60 seconds, a cascading cryptographic failure tore through the entire network with the unstoppable force of an avalanche. The displays went blank one by one, replaced by streams of red alert notifications that painted the command center in hellish light. The elegant dance of secure communications collapsed into digital chaos. "What's our status?" Westbrook snapped, her voice tight with rising alarm as her career began crumbling before her eyes. "Communications, give me a report." Ma'am, we've lost primary crypto synchronization," a young lieutenant stammered, his face pale as he hammered ineffectively at his keyboard. "The entire network is compromised. It's some kind of advanced intrusion, a sophisticated attack vector we can't identify or isolate." The room, once humming with professional confidence and quiet pride, descended into organized panic. Analysts hammered keyboards with increasing desperation, their commands producing nothing but error messages. Operators shouted useless updates into dead headsets, their voices rising in pitch as the magnitude of the failure became clear. The entire multi-billion-dollar communication system was deaf and blind, a network of expensive metal unable to carry a single secure transmission. Colonel Westbrook's face was a mask of controlled rage, her career disintegrating in real time before the unforgiving gaze of General Pike. Behind her, the general observed with the stillness of a predator, his expression unreadable, his silence more devastating than any criticism or rebuke could have been. In her forgotten corner of the facility, Maya had been monitoring secondary data channels on a ruggedized laptop that she'd quietly connected to the network's diagnostic ports. She detected the infiltration vector 30 seconds before it reached the main command center, watching the digital attack unfold across her screens like a slow-motion explosion. Her expression remained unchanged throughout the chaos. She wasn't panicked or surprised. She was analyzing, processing, understanding the elegant malice of the attack with professional appreciation. As the pandemonium in the command center reached its crescendo and the last of the satellite feeds went dark, She walked from her isolated corner, her steps measured and unhurried despite the crisis unfolding around her, moving directly toward the primary systems console at the room's center. The technicians and officers were too consumed by their crisis to notice her approach until she was directly behind them, her presence as quiet and inevitable as falling snow.